After the last car pulled away, leaving me alone with the fresh mound of earth, Liam's lawyer, Mr. Atticus Thorne, gently guided me to his car. His office was downtown, a quiet sanctuary of dark wood, old books, and the scent of leather. It felt a world away from the raw, open wound of the cemetery. I sat in a deep chair, my hands, wrinkled and cold, trembling in my lap. Serafina had declined to come. "I'm simply too overwrought, Atticus," I'd heard her say on the phone. "Eleonora can handle the particulars." Mr. Thorne cleared his throat, his kind eyes looking at me over the rim of his glasses. "Eleonora," he began, his voice impossibly gentle, "we must discuss Liam's will." I braced myself, expecting to be told what my allowance would be, how I would be handled. I assumed Serafina, as his wife, would get everything. I was preparing myself to be a burden, a charity case, a guest in my own son's home. He slid a thick, cream-colored document across the polished mahogany desk. "Liam was very specific," he said, pushing it toward me. "He was meticulous. He left you his personal book collection, his grandfather's desk, and sole ownership of Luminary Innovations." He paused, letting the words sink in. "All of it, Eleonora. The company, the patents, the assets, the stock. Valued at approximately $30 million. It is all yours." The air left my lungs in a painful rush. It was like being doused in ice water. "What?" I whispered. It wasn't a gift, it was a warning. A shield. My son, my thoughtful, perceptive son, had seen this. He knew what his wife was, and this was his final, desperate act of protecting me. "And Serafina?" I managed to ask. Mr. Thorne's face was grim. "She was left the house in which you both reside, for her lifetime, and a very generous spousal allowance. But the company, the power, he left solely to you." A new feeling, cold and sharp, cut through the fog of my grief. It was resolve. "What do you want to do?" Mr. Thorne asked. "The board needs to be notified." I looked at the will, my son's signature a painful blur. "For now," I said, my voice quiet but steely. "We say nothing. We let Mrs. Vance believe she is in control. We wait." Grief is a heavy blanket, but Serafina wore it like a designer cloak. For 2 full days, she was the picture of the devastated widow, drifting through the house in black silk, accepting calls, and sighing with perfect, tragic timing. But on the 3rd day, the sympathy casseroles stopped arriving, and the performance began to wear thin. The mask started to crack. I found her in the kitchen. The sun was setting, painting the snow-covered garden in hues of orange and purple. I was just staring out the window, lost in a memory of Liam as a boy, building a snowman right on that spot. Serafina entered, not in black, but in a plush, cream-colored cashmere lounge set. Her expensive perfume, a heavy floral, smothered the comforting smell of coffee. "Eleonora, darling," she cooed, placing a hand on my arm. Her skin was smooth, but her touch was cold. "I've been so worried about you." I turned to look at her. Her eyes, clear and blue, held no grief. They held impatience. "This house is just so big," she continued, her voice dripping with a sickly, artificial concern. "All these stairs. So much for you to manage all alone. It's a burden, isn't it?" I didn't answer. I just watched her. She mistook my silence for weakness. "I was thinking," she said, her voice brightening. "I did some research, and I found the most lovely retirement community. Sunset Meadows. It's more of a luxury village, really. It has a waiting list, of course, but for Liam's mother, I'm sure I could pull some strings." There it was. Not even 72 hours after we buried my son, and she was trying to ship me off, to put me in a home. She was pushing me out. She saw me as a piece of old, inconvenient furniture. I kept my face blank, my heart pounding, clutching my secret like a shield. That's thoughtful of you, Serafina, I murmured, my eyes dropping back to the garden. I'll have to think about it. My passive, non-committal answer was all the permission she needed. I saw the flash of triumph in her eyes before she masked it. She had made her first move. Her thoughtfulness quickly curdled into avarice. A few days later, I walked into Liam's study. It was the one room I went to when my grief felt too heavy to bear. It still smelled like him, old books, faint pipe tobacco, and wood polish. The door was ajar, and I stopped, my breath catching. Serafina was at his desk. But she wasn't mourning. Spread across the polished cherry wood was Liam's private collection of vintage watches. These were his treasures, his one true indulgence. His grandfather's gold pocket watch, the battered diver's watch he'd worn on every vacation, the elegant, thin timepiece I had saved for a year to buy him for his 30th birthday. Her laptop was open to an auction website, a bright, garish page full of flashing numbers. She was taking pictures with her phone, the flash glinting off the watch faces. Serafina? My voice was sharper than I intended, cutting the heavy silence. She jumped, a flash of pure, unadulterated guilt in her eyes. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a cold, hard defiance. Eleonora. God, don't sneak up on me like that, she snapped. I was just organizing. I pointed one shaking finger at her laptop screen. Organizing? Or selling? She actually scoffed, an ugly, dismissive sound that echoed in the quiet room. We have to be practical, Eleonora. Funerals aren't cheap, you know. And Liam had all this stuff. They're just things. They're valuable. They're assets. Assets. She was selling my son's most cherished memories, piece by piece, to the highest bidder. My grief, which had been a heavy, suffocating fog, began to crystallize. It was turning into a cold, hard rage. I said nothing. I just stood in the doorway and watched her. And my silence, my seeming weakness, made her bolder. She turned back to her laptop, dismissing me completely. The next week, I came home from a long, cold walk. My mind was buzzing, trying to form a plan. As I came up the driveway, I saw a sleek black SUV I didn't recognize. I let myself in the front door, and the sound of Serafina's voice, bright and animated, drifted from the living room. She was laughing. Laughing. It was a high, trilling sound that I hadn't heard from her in months, not even when Liam was alive. It grated on my nerves like scraping metal. I stood in the hallway, invisible. A man in a sharp, ridiculously expensive suit was walking through the living room, tapping at a tablet. Serafina was beside him, gesturing wildly. And the kitchen, as you can see, is a complete teardown, of course. Just awful. But the bones of this place, the location, it's fantastic. The man, who looked more like a shark than a realtor, nodded, a slick smile on his face. The market in this neighborhood is white hot, Mrs. Vance. We can get a premium. She was appraising the house. My son's house. My home. She was planning to sell the roof over my head. She saw me then, standing in the shadows of the hall. Her smile didn't even falter. Oh, Eleonora. Perfect timing. This is Kale. We're just getting a feel for the market. You know, options. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with greed. After all this, unpleasantness is settled, she confided to Kale, but loud enough for me to hear, I'm thinking a year in Tuscany. Maybe longer. Just to heal and find myself, you know? She was planning to finance her globe-trotting healing journey by making me homeless. She truly believed I was a senile old woman with no power, no rights, and no voice. A week later, Serafina decided to host a memorial dinner. It wasn't for family. It was for Liam's business partners, old money acquaintances, and the local elite. It was a performance, and she was the star. The dining room glittered. Serafina, in a stunning black dress, held court at the head of the table, dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes and recounting stories of her tragic loss. I sat at the far end, a silent, gray shadow. Then, over dessert, she turned her sights on me. "Liam," she said, her voice carrying across the table, was always so generous. A few people nodded, murmuring their agreement. Almost to a fault. Her eyes found mine. A small, cruel smile played on her lips. "He was always so worried about his mother. You know, after her husband died, she struggled. Became a bit of a drain, if you know what I mean." The clinking of spoons against porcelain stopped. The table went utterly silent. I could feel every eye in the room on me. My face burned with a shame so hot it felt like a fever. "He was constantly sending money," Serafina continued, her voice now a symphony of false pity. "Paying for her little cottage, her medical bills, her groceries. He was a saint, my husband. Such a heavy burden he carried. He never complained, but I knew. I knew how much it cost him. She had done it. In one short speech, she had painted me as a pathetic, grasping leech. A needy old woman who had bled her sainted son dry." The partners looked at me with new, calculating pity. The other guests looked away, embarrassed. Serafina had isolated me, destroyed my reputation, and solidified her own image as the long-suffering, noble widow. I held her gaze. My hand was shaking so hard under the table I had to grip the napkin. But I didn't say a word. I just let her dig her own grave, one cruel, lying word at a time. Her cruelty wasn't just in her words. After the dinner party, she began a physical assault on his memory. The painters arrived the following Monday. They covered the warm, forest-green walls of Liam's study, his sanctuary, in a sterile, cold, unforgiving white. "It's so much cleaner now, don't you think?" she chirped, walking through the room as if she'd done us a favor. "So much more modern." It felt like a hospital. Then came the landscapers. I was drinking my morning tea when I heard the roar of machinery. I looked out the kitchen window and my heart stopped. A team of men with chainsaws and backhoes was ripping out Liam's prize-winning rose bushes. The bushes his grandfather had planted. The bushes he and I had tended to every Sunday, our one quiet ritual. "They're so old-fashioned," I heard her call out to the foreman. "All those thorns. So much work. Just flatten it." "I'm thinking a nice, simple gravel garden." I watched in mute horror as they tore his roots out of the earth. She was erasing him. Erasing any trace that he, or I, had ever truly lived there. She was systematically dismantling his life, his passions, his history. She was so confident that I was nothing. A ghost, already gone. She didn't realize that I wasn't a ghost. I was a witness. Every rip of the chainsaw, every swipe of the paintbrush, was another nail in her coffin. My silence was her poison, and she was drinking it down, believing it was wine. The final insult, the one that broke the last thread of my restraint, came in a wave of cardboard boxes. Day after day, delivery trucks from expensive, Fifth Avenue stores arrived. Designer shoes. Handbags that cost more than my first car. Jewelry. She was spending money she didn't have, cashing in on a future she assumed was hers, a future built on my son's grave. She had the audacity to parade her new purchases in front of me, swanning into the living room where I was trying to read. "You really have to learn to let go, Eleonora," she said, dangling a new, gaudy diamond bracelet from her wrist. "Liam would want me to be happy, don't you think? Life is for the living." She twirled, admiring herself in the hallway mirror. "And really," she added, "what am I supposed to do? Live like a nun? I'm still a young woman." I just looked at her. My son was dead. His memory was being auctioned off. His home was being dismantled. His garden was a pit of mud. And his wife was on a shopping spree. The rage inside me was no longer hot. It had cooled, hardened. It was now a diamond, cold and sharp and unbreakable. I had watched her long enough. I had given her all the rope she needed. She had built her own trap. It was time for me to spring it. I'm curious, believing she was the undisputed heir, Serafina's final, fatal move was one of pure hubris. She called an emergency meeting with the board of directors of Luminary Innovations. She even hired her own corporate lawyer, a woman with a face like a hatchet. She sent me a calendar invite, a courtesy, as if I were a distant, senile aunt. Just to keep you in the loop, darling, she'd said, a smug, condescending smile on her face. Big changes are coming. That morning, she dressed for war. She wore a black suit so sharp it could have cut glass. She looked like a sleek, beautiful vulture preparing for a feast. Wish me luck, she said, grabbing her briefcase. I'm going to make some big changes today. It's time to restructure. This company has been mismanaged for too long. Mismanaged? By my son? The rage flared, but I pushed it down. I'm sure you will, dear, I said quietly. I waited exactly 10 minutes, until her car was well down the long, winding driveway. Then I picked up my phone. My hand was perfectly steady. Mr. Thorne, I said, my voice cold and clear. It's time. Please pick me up in 20 minutes. And Atticus, bring the original will. I put on my best black dress, the one I'd worn to the funeral. It felt fitting. It was the end of an era, and the beginning of a new one. We walked into the boardroom on the 30th floor just as Serafina was starting her presentation. The room was glass, overlooking the entire city. Which is why, she was saying to the stunned, grim-faced board, an immediate liquidation of the R&D assets is our only sensible option. It's dead weight. She was going to gut my son's company. She was going to sell his dream for parts. Her voice faltered and died when she saw me. I stood in the doorway, Mr. Thorne at my side. Eleonora, she sputtered, her face flushing an ugly red. What is the meaning of this? This is a private meeting. Security! Mr. Thorne stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. He was no longer the gentle family lawyer. He was a lion. I'm afraid there has been a grave misunderstanding, he said, his voice booming, silencing her. He walked to the head of the table and placed a thick, bound document in front of the chairman. This, he announced, is the last will and testament of Liam Vance. The true will. The room was dead silent. You could hear Serafina's ragged breathing. The chairman opened the document. His eyes went wide. He looked at me, then at Serafina, then back at me with dawning comprehension. As you can see, Mr. Thorne continued, his voice ringing with authority, Mr. Vance left 100% of Luminary Innovations, and all controlling shares, to his mother. He gestured to me, and I stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce your new owner and CEO, Eleonora Vance. The color drained from Serafina's face. The mask didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. Her lawyer was speechless, shuffling her papers. The woman Serafina had tried to dump in a nursing home, the drain she had publicly humiliated, now owned her entire world. She physically stumbled, grabbing the table for support. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I took my seat at the head of the table, the seat Serafina had so arrogantly claimed. She was still sputtering, her face a mask of pure, ugly rage. You can't. It's fraud. I'm his wife. I'll sue. I looked at her. For the first time, I let her see the cold, hard diamond of my resolve. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Serafina, I said, your position on the advisory board is terminated, effective immediately. Her lawyer finally spoke. Mrs. Vance, we will contest this. Mr. Thorne just smiled. Contest it with what? The will is ironclad. And as for your client's spousal allowance, it is, of course, contingent on her good behavior. I'd say attempting to liquidate the company and publicly defaming its new owner qualifies as spectacularly bad behavior. Serafina was left with nothing but the house, for now, and the mountain of debt she'd racked up on her shopping sprees. Security was called, and they escorted her from the building. I didn't sell the company. I grew it. 6 months later, I stood on a different stage, not in a boardroom, but in a crowded auditorium. I looked out at a sea of young, hopeful faces. My son, Liam Vance, believed in dreams, I said, my voice thick with emotion, but strong. He believed in innovation. I unveiled the banner behind me, the Liam Vance Foundation for Young Innovators. Funded entirely by the profits of luminary innovations, it would give seed money to the next generation of dreamers. I had preserved my son's true legacy. Thank God I kept that secret. My silence was my shield, but in the end, it was my sword. And it had delivered a justice my son would have been proud of. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to my channel for more compelling narratives and don't forget to hit that like button. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on Eleonora's resilience. Share your comments below.